Next we have Dr. Tom Shirley, and I did not know this, but Tom was a former Padre Island National Seashore Ranger before, and he conducted his thesis research on Padre Island. Now he is the chair of biodiversity and conservation science at the Hart Research Institute at Texas A&M University. Tom?
Thank you, John.
Pointer, and there's the clicker. Oh, it's in Scott.
Where is it?
Shirley.
So I thank John for hosting this today.
And
I think it's
Sargassum.
and Team Sargassum, but I think it's particularly appropriate. Some people would say that John has a very sarcastic personality. That's a little weak, but I'm trying to get some humor in here. So I wanted to thank Texas Parks and Wildlife. Todd Neer provided some of the photos that I'm going to show you here. So I'm talking about the sargassum community, the organisms that live in sargassum. Most people, most of the talks will address sargassum after it comes to the beach. I'm going to move back offshore a little bit. So first of all, most of our information is on the Sargasso Sea, and most people don't really have a concept of how large that is. That's about 5 times, a little over 5 times the size of Texas. That really represents a small portion of all the sargassum in the world's oceans. There's an equivalent amount considerably more in the Pacific Ocean, much larger ocean. There's lots of sargassum that's around all of rooted or benthic sargassum. Standing crop of sargassum in the Sargasso Sea, estimated at 4 to 11 million metric tons. That's 9 to 24 billion pounds. That's only the Sargasso Sea. And one of the papers that I found said that it could increase in biomass at up to 10% per day. So that sounds pretty high, but not excessively high for a lot of algal species. So this large, distinctive pelagic habitat has existed at least since the Silurian. There are fossil records of it. They go way back. I didn't know that until I started reading some. So this is a very uniform habitat, has a very large area, has a long geologic age, and it's resulted in a well-adapted, distinctive faunal assemblage. There are at least 145 species of invertebrates, 100 species of fish, fungi, micro and macro epiphytes. Many of the sea turtles utilize the habitat, and at least 19 seabird species are considered sargassum specialists. These are primarily the Polariformes. We gave this talk Columbus Day. We had Coastal Bend Bays Foundation had one of their monthly sessions on sargassum, and at that time I did a little research, and one of the things that I found out was that Columbus provided the first detailed botanical description of sargassum. And it actually saved him. His crew was near mutiny, and then they started seeing sargassum, and they thought that it was in fact rockweed, so they assumed they were near shore, and Columbus was able to put them off from mutiny for some length of time, which allowed him to make it to the New World. So this is the North Atlantic subtropical gyre, and it's very oligotrophic, means it's low in nutrient, but the amount of production inside the sargassum is much nutrient-containing surrounding waters. So just a number of the publications that are very useful. I just went through and copied some of the title pages of some of these, in which the papers deal with the organisms that you're likely to see in sargassum. There are lots of publications on the individual members of the fauna. So a little more detail about the critters that live in sargassum. And over here we can see juvenile sea turtles. They are utilize the habitat, particularly in the Sargasso Sea, but certainly in our own Gulf of Mexico to a large extent for habitat protection. It's complex habitat. Among the fishes, there are lots of the larger fishes that utilize sargassum, but there's a large assemblage of small fishes that are associated with these sargassum rafts. 54 species from 23 families were found in sargassum community of the Florida current. This is a 1972 publication. Only 40 species from 15 families in the eastern Gulf of Mexico in a 1977 publication. So this varies as you move to different areas of sargassum, whether you're out in the Sargasso Sea, near shore, or in the Gulf of Mexico. So lots of these large fishes utilize sargassum primarily for feeding, but also for just for habitat. The dolphins are particularly associated with sargassum, and in fact, most of the stomach contents of dolphin report finding sargassum in the stomach, which they ingest while they're feeding on prey items. Everyone that's ever done marine aquaria and has gone out and collected sargassum fish is familiar with histrio. This is an anglerfish, one of the antenariids. They have this lure which they use to attract curious fish or shrimp. These are extremely cannibalistic. They defend a territory within the sargassum. When they do mate, the female injects a large mass of eggs in this egg veil, and then the male goes about fertilizing the eggs, and the female gets away from him before he can eat her. But, so when I was in college, one of our popular things once we got into focusing on marine biology, everyone built aquaria. Everybody would go to the coast and wade offshore and collect critters in sargassum, and we would actually collect pickle buckets full of sargassum before it washed ashore, and we would go through it for various kinds of critters. There are 3 species of crabs that are commonly found in sargassum. Planes minutus is the sargassum crab. In fact, all of these crabs are called sargassum crabs. Portunacei is also called the sargassum crab. This is one of the unusual portunids, one of the swimming crabs, because it can complete its life cycle in the crab. Most all other portunids have to be able to form a cup in sediment in which they extrude their eggs to allow the egg mass to form the sponge, allow it to set up. These guys can complete this in the sargassum weed. Just as an aside, when I was just beginning graduate school, I found this Plainese washed up on Padre Island, and went, and I wasn't familiar with it for good reason. It hadn't been reported from the Gulf of Mexico previously, and so I published my first little note, but I didn't find Plainese minutus. Instead, I found Plainese cyaneus, which is the Pacific equivalent that's found in Pacific sargassum, and that hadn't been reported in the North Atlantic. The genus hadn't been reported in the Gulf of Mexico, and I got some help from some of the scientists at the Smithsonian to help me write a note on that. So that was my first publication in graduate school, and I was a little worried about finding only one, and the next year I found another one. So they're out there, and probably lots of people have found them and just don't report things. Shrimp are relatively common in sargassum. These are 2 very common species. This particular species, in fact, mimics the fronds, whereas the Hippolyte, and you can see the shrimp and the little floats. This one, the Hippolyte, mimics the floats, and so it has a circular body. And in fact, in this particular paper by Hacker and Madden, they did behavioral studies to show that the shrimp would be attracted to those artificial mimics of either fronds or the floats. Some of the other common shrimps, there are some sea spiders, 3 species that are common. Joel Hedgepeth, who used to be over at the University of Texas Marine Science Center, and he wrote a big monograph on pycnogonids of the world. He thought that sargassum was responsible for the zoogeographic distribution of many of the sargassum species of the world. So these things, although they look like spiders, they're not even closely related. And here you can see the shrimps in here, very closely mimicking the sargassum. See a lot of hydroids in sargassum, and in fact 43 species of hydroids have been reported from sargassum. These sargassum hydroids, common epiphytes, and they include 4 very common species of hydroids. Well, the plainhead filefish eats 3 of these hydroids readily, but avoids the 4th. So it looks like there's some chemical ecology going on, and there have been a number of studies, and to show the chemical deterrence to predation by this species of hydroid. Most folks, one of our prized finds when we would be collecting sargassum would be the sargassum nudibranch, and you can see it also blends in very well. But there's a very common shelled gastropod, just one, and 6 other nudibranch species. Sargassum commonly found on sargassum. There are 2 acorn barnacles commonly found, but 4 gooseneck barnacles. Here's a lepus species here. There are ectoprocs. These are bryozoans, former name for them. 3 species commonly found, 6 species of the amphipods, and 4 species of isopods. So the amphipods are laterally compressed. The isopods look more like roaches. They're dorso-ventrally compressed. This kind of interesting. This is a new species of sargassum which has not yet been described, but this was found on Saba Bank in the Caribbean island near St. Martin, and we participated in an invertebrate survey at Saba Bank this last October, and there was a group of algologists who found this new species of sargassum the year prior to us going down. So, in short, sargassum is a habitat, serves lots of purposes, lots of different invertebrates that are found there. It's a very identifiable, unique community. It also serves as a rafting mechanism for lots of organisms that are not strict members of the sargassum community. More of the same. Sargassum is treated as both a fish, since there is the one corporation that commercially harvests in U.S. waters. So it does fall under that, but it's also considered as critical habitat, as Joe just told us. Under the Magnuson-Stevens Act, it is considered critical habitat for quite a number of species, and so it has to be managed, and I'll stop with that. Sure.
I keep hearing that in the gyres in the middle of the ocean, there are these huge piles of plastic.
Exactly. In fact,
Is that
the same thing that led to the concentration of the sargassum and lets it grow there and be retained also tracks and retains plastics of all sorts. And same thing occurs in the central gyres of the North and the South Pacific Ocean.
Could you briefly describe how much of the sargassum is covered with epizones, which cause it to sink in the open ocean rather than come ashore?
I know that there is a certain amount of sargassum. In fact, it does sink continually, and that sargassum, in fact, provides a large amount of organic material to the deep sea benthos. So the masses of sargassum, as they sink out, they sediment to the bottom, and they're rich sources of organic material to what generally is considered an impoverished benthos. So the average depth of the Gulf of Mexico, for instance, is approximately a mile in depth. Most people think of it as shallow body of water. Not the case. There's a huge amount of sargassum in the Gulf, and more people will tell us about that shortly. But a large amount of that sinks to the bottom. What causes the sinking, I'm not exactly sure. Some of it may well be due to the growth of epiphytes and other things on the sargassum. Other is just probable decay of floats and other things on it. But I wouldn't know exactly. I better move on, and if you have questions, you can catch me later.
Thank you.